Hello, we're back to go through another verification-driven development session. And last time we had 4 passing tests and 100% coverage. Now we're going to continue on in our exercise. Again, we're going to look at using that test plan file to create a failing test and continue to work with AI and verify its work as we move along. The functional spec, the system design, and the test plan are all documents that create a way to specify what it is we want the AI to do. We also have the Copilot instructions that limit what it is that the create guardrails for the AI. So it's going to go through and run a new test formulas file. So it's created a new file based on that. So we're going to have it log in again. It wants to make sure that I want to keep going. And it's starting to design a new failing test. So we can take a look at that failing test that it's created in the test formulas file. And here we see that it's going to put values into these cells 1 and 2. And we're going to see that that it expects this to fail. And when we look at the run failed. So now let's keep these and let's write just enough code to have the failing test pass. Again, keep it simple. You can take a look at what code it wants to insert. So it's checking for that equal sign to determine whether it's going to evaluate a formula or it's just a value, not a formula. So at this point, it wants to run the test and see if the test will pass. It does not pass. Let's determine why it's not passing. And the reason is that leading space is not cleared out. So it doesn't know it's a formula because it's got a leading space. And now when we continue, that pass. Now we're going to make sure that all the tests pass. And then what will happen is we'll get an implementation summary that will explain what's happened and how the code has changed. And we'll keep that. Let's continue on using the test plan to write just one more failing test. Take a look at what it's suggesting. And it's suggesting that it's going to put a few values into the various fields and make sure that those values all get set. Let's see if that test fails. Nope, that test did not fail. So the AI is still working on trying to find a piece of the code that does not work properly. And it does. So the addition of 2 plus 3 does not come out to 5. So the next failing test is going to test the addition operations, and we see that that test fails. So again, we're going to write just enough code to have the failing test pass. Let's keep the files that have already been generated, and let's continue. Take a look at the code and understand how it's going to evaluate the mathematical expression and how it will return if that fails. Okay, we have that pass. We'll continue to make sure all of the tests pass. It's working on giving me a summary of how everything is working so far so that I can understand it as it goes through each of these calculations. We'll keep those changes. At this point, we might want to check the code coverage. See how the tests cover the code under test. We can see there are a couple of lines that are missing. And at this point is we could say create tests that cover the untested code. And at this point, it's going to devise a test, create that test, and there should be an error handling for a malformed test. So we're going to add that into our spreadsheet tests. And now it's introducing this idea of a evaluation that will evaluate statements and creates the passing test. Now it's going to go through and let's see how the coverage has improved. We're back to 100% coverage. At this point, it's working on a summation of what's been happening. and let's keep the files that have changed. We'll do another round where we're going to use the test plan file, see what more we can test in our test-driven development. It's going to work on some tests regarding multiplication and the multiplication operation passes. So what's written so far still passes. So the additional tests, which we see here regarding multiplication, is working just fine. It's going to try and build another test. And that also passes. So what it's built so far is pretty robust. So each of the different scenarios continues to work as it goes through the test plan and adopts another test to see if it can verify the specification. Each point I can take a look at what it's adding and how those tests should process. It finally found a test that fails. And this is a basic cell reference. So this is where we've moved to the dependency file and have started working on dependency oriented. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at that dependency file. So it's created a new test file, and it's on to the next section of our test plan. Let's go ahead and keep these plans, keep these files, and let's write just enough code to have the failing test pass. Remember to keep it simple. We're going to go ahead and see if this change can pass. Let's take a look at that change. So we see that a private method has been added to work through the cell references, and it's going to see if it can identify how to find a cell and return that cell reference. Now we see all the tests pass, and an explanation of what it added and how it works. We can review that code. Let's go ahead and check the code coverage. And we can see that everything is still passing. Let's use the test plan to create another failing test. Let's take a look at this test. So now it's going to go in and look at the cells and how the changes are propagated and how they auto-update those changes. Turns out that this new test passes. Implementation propagates those dependent cell changes. I'm going to create another test that's going to be a little bit more involved with multiple cell references. And that one passes. It's looking for the next multi-level dependencies as its test. See if that passes as well. So the implementation meets all of the specification in our test plan so far. We're looking for a bit of unimplemented functionality. So it's going to keep going through the test plan, looking at all of the capabilities and see if it can find something. So the next file that it's created is the circular references. So this is the next section in our test plan. And we're looking for anything that is unimplemented. And it finds that passed. At this point, it's now found that circular reference doesn't happen as expected. Does not throw the error that's expected. So we can keep that. And we have a failing test. Let's write just enough code to have the failing test pass. So as we're watching, we keep an eye on what it's trying to do as it makes changes to the file. Again, the specification was built out through that test plan, and a lot of the details on how to find problems and how to fix them are happening through that implementation. that goes through and explains how to understand the code and how the code has happened. So we're going to keep that. We're going to pause here, close all the other files, and take a look at our sheet to understand how this works. So at the beginning, what we do is we track the cells that we are currently evaluating. And then in the get, we look through to understand the value. If the value is not there, it's going to return an empty string. That is the default for all cells. It's going to look for the formula and see how the formula is treated. If it's not a formula, it's just going to strip the value and return that. It looks for cell references, and it has a put method and a get literal method. Okay. And then we'll take a look at the test files. We'll see how these are organized and whether they're clear to understand how the code works in circular references and what kind of errors it throws. We'll understand how the dependencies work and go through the various tests that have been built to see if they all make sense and meet the specification, and how formulas work, how those are built out. Again, making sure that they meet the specification. And then there's the simple spreadsheet, which we started with, and how that works, and how values are put in there, and then how they, when we get them back out, how those values look. Okay. That is the essence of the verifier-driven development approach. Thank you.